European maps from the Middle Ages are full of strange lands, legendary races, and fabulous monsters. Only the Church, with the help of God, was able to provide protection against these horrors. The medieval world was hard to understand, and the people believed that their souls were always in danger of being stolen away by all sorts of spiritual creatures. In a world where death happened sooner rather than later, the lines between the living and the dead were much more blurred than they are now. The supernatural was ingrained into medieval lives. Everything from disease to weather patterns were all thought to be determined by God, and this led to superstitious thinking. Travel was uncommon for ordinary people, and therefore sightings of strange beasts were rare. However, in today's episode of Medieval Madness, we're going to take a look at some of the more weird and wonderful medieval monsters. Welcome to Medieval Madness. The Bestiaries. These medieval books of beasts were illuminated texts written in Northern Europe. Everything in the world was a manifestation of God for Christians, and the Bestiaries mainly concentrated on the religious meaning of each animal and its relationship with God and nature. The books described all sorts of creatures and their characteristics, and were essential for the medieval men and women who wanted to understand and survive in their hostile world. Depending on the size of the bestiary, it could contain anywhere from tens to hundreds of animal descriptions, each one illustrated with an image. Most were usually divided up into sections such as serpents, birds, sea creatures, and land animals. Many of the creatures depicted were quite ordinary, such as the blackbird, rabbit, or badger, although there were some strange ideas about many of them, such as the owl being a dirty bird because it prefers the dark to light, or the spider being, quote, an aerial worm that takes nourishment from the air. As well as this, they believed that bees were just tiny birds. Some descriptions went as far as explaining an animal's significance in the Christian world and conveyed some sort of moral story, whilst others just focused on the physical aspects of the animal. Originally intended to educate, bestiaries were later acquired by the wealthy for entertainment purposes. Many of the beasts were also shown on maps and were related in the writings of explorers, and the animals that populated the minds of people during the Middle Ages ranged from the fantastic to the ordinary. Unicorns. Of all the medieval beasts, the unicorn is arguably the most beloved. It is a prime example of a legendary creature being presented as a living allegory, with both its behavior and physical appearance representing aspects of the Christian faith. It has been described variously as being as small as a goat or as large as a horse. The animal has a single horn in the center of its head, usually quite long. The horn is sometimes depicted as having a spiral channel running up it. The unicorn is both fierce and powerful, as well as being so fast that no hunter can catch it. Naturally, to capture and tame it, a virgin girl is needed. On seeing the maiden, the unicorn will go to her and lay its head in her lap before falling asleep. Then the stupid animal can be easily taken, but it has to be handed over and presented to the king. You see, the horn is highly valued as it can be used to detect poison. If dipped into a poisoned drink, then the drink can be made harmless. If this wasn't obvious, the unicorn is entirely fictional and a symbol for Christ, and became one of the most beloved animals in art during the medieval period because of this connection. Its horn represents the union between Jesus and God, its small size represents Christ's humility, and its fierceness shows hell's failure in being able to hold him. Magical. Griffins. The hybrid of an eagle and a lion, the griffin is known as being one of the fiercest beasts in the bestiary. It first appeared in the writings of ancient Egypt before 3,000 years BC. It has 4 feet and is covered in feathers. Its body is similar to the lion, but its head and wings are like those of an eagle. It would tear horses apart and eat them, or carry men off to its nest so that it could feed its young. In his book of travels, written during the 14th century, Sir John de Mandeville explores a country somewhere in Asia that he describes as having more griffins than any other that he has ever explored. He says that they are so strong they can fly to their nest whilst carrying a great horse or, quote, 2 oxen yoked together at the plough. In fact, he claims that one griffin has a, quote, body more strong and more great than 8 lions, and more great and stronger than 100 eagles. He says the talons of the griffin are so long and so large that they were like the horns of great oxen, and that men made drinking cups from them, as well as creating bows from the griffin's ribs. Manticores. The Manticore is another hybrid, but although this one also has a lion's body, it was blood red and has the face of a man with blue eyes, as well as a tail like that of a scorpion complete with a stinger. It can jump great distances and is very energetic. As well as eating the flesh of humans, it has a voice like that of a whistle and can shoot needles from its tail. The 13th century monk Bartholomew Anglicus described it as having, quote, 3 rows of teeth, a horrible voice as the voice of a trumpet, and that of all the beasts of the earth, none is more cruel. Dragons. De Mandeville speaks about a dragon that is 100 fathom in length. The largest of the serpents, in fact larger than any other animal on the earth, the dragon was usually found in caves. It has a crested head, narrow nostrils, and a small mouth from where he thrusts out his tongue. His most powerful weapon, however, was his tail, which he would use to lash and wound his prey. They were said to be born in the hot and humid areas of India and Ethiopia. The dragon is crested because he is thought to be like the devil, who is the king of pride. Dragons in the European Middle Ages often featured in stories about the saints. Venetius Phonatus, the French bishop, wrote about a dragon in the 6th century. He told how a Parisian bishop hit it on the head 3 times before leading it through Paris on a leash and banishing it back to the forest. The dragon was caught eating a sinful woman's dead body. And in the 11th century, Byzantine historian Michael Psellos tells us how Saint Marina encountered a demon in the guise of a dragon. Ignoring her prayers, the dragon swallowed her whole, but when the Marina made the sign of the cross, the dragon was split apart and died. Centaurs. With the body of a horse and the head of a man, centaurs are featured on the 11th century Bayeux tapestry. They are also mentioned in the 7th or 8th century manuscripts known as the Marvels of the East. There they are described as being, quote, a man down to the navel and afterwards in the shape of an ass, rather than a horse. In Greek and Roman mythology, they were thought to be lustful creatures, and this idea of the centaur being lascivious was passed down to the Middle Ages. Another fantastic animal similar to the centaur is the satyr. Almost identical in appearance and behaviour, it differs only by having the lower body of a goat. Medieval bestiaries usually place both centaur and satyr in Ethiopia. The dangers for the Christian here are quite clear. There is peril in the sin of lust, as well as in to travel to strange places inhabited by strange people. The Sawfish. This sea monster was very large and dragon-like with enormous wings which it would use to hold off the wind from a sailing ship. Then it would swim underneath and cut the ship in two with the saw-tooth crest that was on its back. Once the ship had sunk and the sailors were drowned, then the sawfish would gorge itself on their flesh. If a ship is able to outrun it, then the sawfish will become tired. After racing for 30 or 40 furlongs, it would give up, drawing its wings in and diving deep under the water. Morally, the sawfish is like a righteous man who starts out with good intentions, but soon gets tired and after sinking back into sin is carried down into the depths of hell. The wind being held back by the ship's sails is like the devil who holds back holy inspiration from men. Mermaids. Another type of half-human creature were the mermaids. They would be a beautiful woman from the waist up, but instead of having legs and feet, their bottom half would be a fish's tail. Sometimes they would be depicted with 2 tails. They are often seen on decorations in churches, holding a comb and a mirror to represent pride and vanity, even though their hair is often tousled and unkempt. Many medieval cultures had folktales about mermaids or creatures very similar to them, including in the Middle East and Asia, and they had a mixed reputation. In some stories they can be found helping people, but in other cases they were said to try to lure men into the water with their beauty, where they would drown them. In Western Europe they represented the deadly sin of lust, not just tempting men to lose their lives, but also their souls. A medieval example of contemporary sexism against women who were thought to tempt men into committing sin. Another creature similar to the mermaid was the siren, although some were thought to have the lower body of a bird rather than a fish. They sang beautiful songs to lure sailors to sleep. Then they would attack and kill them. Medieval men who allowed themselves to be caught up in worldly pleasures would leave themselves open to these forces of evil. Thank you for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. We do hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week for another video. Cheers!